Hi everybody, it's Ajanette, and I am here to go over your mini paper data collection. So we've already collected data. I want to show you the data sheet. So this is our data sheet. Please note that there's two different sheets. So if you're analyzing the gender research question, then focus on the gender tab. If you're analyzing the race research question, focus on the race tab, okay? So I'm going to focus on the gender tab just for the purposes of our discussion. I want you to note that, see over here in this left-hand column, you have the different colors. Remember that when we went over the study, there were 4 different conditions. So each color represents a separate condition. For the purposes of your research paper, you only focus on cisgender compared to genderqueer, or for race, you're going to focus on Asian compared to Caucasian, okay? So I broke it up so that you can see which condition they were in, okay? I did put notes on the very bottom, so pay attention to that. This is going to be your independent variable or your condition, right? And then over here is the dependent variables that you're going to focus on. So in green, that's your dependent variable. And then I also wanted to focus on here, and let me just put this in orange for you so that it's easy to pick out. This is all your manipulation check. So a manipulation check is what we do as researchers just to make sure that the participants fully understood, in our case, the gender identity of the candidate that they were reviewing or the race of the candidate that they were reviewing. Because if they didn't pick up on their race or gender, then our manipulation didn't work, right? We're not able to accurately draw conclusions about differences between the two different candidates with differing races because our participants never even picked up the race of the candidate. So we want a large percentage of our participants. We would expect that not all pick it up, but we would expect that a large percentage do. So in terms of correctly identifying the name of the candidate, and that was our manipulation, 88 of the 98 candidates. So let me go back a little bit. This has a total of 98 candidates. It says 99, but the first line is actually the titles. So it's 98 candidates. There were actually a total of 99 who responded, but one said they did not agree to participate, and so they were excluded and eliminated from the data set. You do need to report that information in your methods section. So I want to go back and I want to talk a little bit about, in the methods section, you need to talk about the participants. How many were there? In our case, 98. What sampling methods did we use? So you're already diving into the content of the textbook and doing the assignments, and we talk about different sampling methods. Sampling methods are our recruitment methods. How were our participants recruited? Remember, in research, we really want to know about the general population. We're trying to find out, do professors in general, are they viewed differently based on their race? Are they viewed differently based on their gender identity, right? But we are just doing a sample, and we're looking at a small group of participants and how they rated different genders, or how they rated different races, right? And so that's called a sample. And so the sampling is the method by which we pulled that subgroup of individuals from the larger population. So in this case, students overall, how did we arrive at our sample? Excuse me. And convenient sampling is using individuals who are readily available to you. In this case, the sample consisted of students who were enrolled in research methods across 5 separate sections of at Mount San Jacinto College in Riverside County, California. Data was aggregated across those 5 subjects and used to analyze the research questions at hand. There were a total of 99 participants who attempted to complete the survey, of which 1 was excluded because they did not give informed consent. So the final sample included 98 participants, and each participant was then randomly assigned to one of 2 conditions. If it's race, they either reviewed an Asian or a Caucasian. If it's gender, they reviewed either cisgender or they reviewed a genderqueer candidate. Okay, and then you're going to talk about, did we exclude anybody? No, not necessarily. And then you have to provide the demographics of the participants. So let me take you back to the data page. So this information is really relevant when you're describing who your participants are, how many you had, where you got them, right? And then over here to the right, in the blue. So the orange is our manipulation check data, and then our blue is our participant data, okay? So we always gather information from our participants to make sure our sample is representative. Some of you looked at research studies that were from Britain or from China, and that's interesting. You have to ask yourself, what is similar about our cultures, right? What is different about our cultures? Can you generalize research from another culture to those in the U.S.? Can you generalize the conclusions? So you have to ask yourself the nature of the study and look at the sample. How was the sample different, and is it generalizable? External validity. Can it be applied validly to other populations or other samples, should I say, or to the larger population, should I say. So that being said, I have highlighted the columns in blue as your participant data. That needs to be input in SPSS and analyzed, and I'll show you how to do that in the results video. Once you have that output, you're going to have to explain how, of your 98 participants, what was the race and ethnic breakdown of those participants, what was the gender breakdown of that sample, what was the average age, what was the range of ages, what was the sexuality breakdown of that sample, what was the marital status breakdown, what was the political affiliation, and what was the religious affiliation. Now, I highlighted problematic or areas that need your attention, okay? So this individual right here, they said they believe in higher education but don't believe one religion is the correct, or a higher being. Okay, so we're going to put that in other, right? We don't know what that means. When it's none, just for the purposes of religion, you can have a none category, right? But when they leave it blank or they put NA or choose not to state, then literally just blank it out in your data input. And then notice that this individual said they're from planet Earth, they're human, they didn't give an age. You know, this individual, I'm going to have to say I'm really not sure that they took this seriously. Here, this individual says, you know, they're a mutt, and then they said, this is asking about, please specify gender identity, and they said whatever I want to be at the time, since it no longer matters what your genders or what your genetics say. That's problematic, right? That reflects an individual that likely doesn't understand and is not educated about the diversity of gender, and it's likely an individual that doesn't respect gender diversity, and that's problematic as well. So this individual might have some bias in this particular study, particularly if they were looking at the gender candidates for the purposes of theirs. It looks like they were assigned to a cisgender candidate, so it likely didn't skew our data as well at all, but you have to pay attention to those kinds of responses And then as researchers, you have to decide, do we want to keep them in or take them out? And then this one, again, they prefer not to answer anything, so just leave that blank, okay? And then SPSS will take care of your missing data and filter it out, okay? I left it in because I want you as researchers to understand, what does it look like? What data do you get? And then you have to make decisions as researchers on what to do with the data. Now, data has to be coded. And so in SPSS in the results video, I'll show you how to code the data. I've assigned codes to each of the groups to use, so all of our coding can be the same. We have to code nominal variables. We do not have to code scale variables. In SPSS, scale data includes either interval or ratio data. So going back to your stats class, you should know what the scales of measurement are. Nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. In SPSS, we say interval and ratio, we call it scale data. We treat it the same. We are going to treat Likert ratings as scale data. And then nominal is anything categorical or difference in groups. Ordinal is ranked. Interval and ratio is where we have equal intervals between the groups, and then ratio has a true zero. We're going to treat all of our DVs as scale, and then your IVs are going to be nominal. When you're talking about participants, information and data, your participant race and ethnicity is categorical, so it's nominal. Age is scale, and then sexuality, status, marital status, political affiliation, and religious affiliation are all categorical, okay? So that's a little bit about your participants. So going back to your mini paper, you're going to have to describe all of that based on the results of your SPSS analysis. You also need to describe the materials. So use the links that were provided to the materials. Describe them. Describe each of the surveys that were asked. Go to the actual Google link and go ahead and look at those surveys that were conducted. What types of questions were asked? What was the rating scale? Let me see. Oops. Let me see if I can go there now. No, give me a second. Here you go. Here's one. So let me go to the questions. And first of all, you know, they were provided informed consent. So after providing informed consent, they first were given, they were randomly assigned to one of 4 conditions, and then they were asked to review the applicant materials. I'm basically describing the procedure, right? And then they were asked to do an evaluation of the professor, where they were responding to a series of questions. So count the questions, tell me how many questions that were extracted from the CCSSE evaluation. And you can Google that. It is actually one of the most commonly used professor evaluation forms. The questions were really or asked the students to rate their level of agreement on a scale of 1 to 4, with 1 being strongly disagree and 4 being strongly agree. They were asked to rate their level of agreement on a series of questions, all related to the quality of learning that they expected from this professor. Then the SEEQ evaluation form was utilized, and students were asked to rate their level of agreement, again on a scale of 1 to 4, evaluating more of the expected content or learning from the class. And then they provided overall ratings. So they compared their overall rating of the professor on a scale of 1 to 5, from very poor to very good. And then they provided a hiring recommendation. So given this materials, I'd recommend interviewing this candidate. And so on a scale of 1 to 4, with 1 being strongly disagree and 4 being agree. And then this is the candidate profile, where the questions that we used for the manipulation check to make sure our participants did in fact understand the manipulation and knew the differing race of the candidate they were reviewing or the differing gender identity. And then the demographics were about the participants themselves. So all of that data then fed into our worksheet that you're reviewing here. Okay? And you're going to now describe that in your method section. So you're going to describe your participants, you're going to describe the materials, and then you're going to describe the procedure that I just described, and then you're going to write a design and statistical analysis. So this study is a between subjects experimental design. What do I mean by that? There were different people in each condition. So different people reviewed cisgender candidates than genderqueer. That's called between subjects. If it was a within subject, first you would have evaluated a cisgender candidate, then the same people would have evaluated a genderqueer candidate. That's not what we did. You reviewed one or the other. So it was a between subjects experimental design. It's experimental because you were randomly assigned to those candidates. So you did not get to choose which candidate you were reviewing. You were randomly assigned. You have to include the independent variable. In this case, you choose which one your group is doing. The dependent variable is either going to be the overall rating, the likability of the candidate, or it's going to be the hiring recommendation or interview recommendation of the candidate. And then you're going to do a two-way independent measures t-test. It's going to be a, excuse me, that's a lie. You're going to do you're going to do an independent measures t-test. The two-way doesn't apply. So you're going to do an independent measures t-test. So it's independent measures because that corresponds to between subjects with different people in each group. And it's a t-test because you just had 2 conditions. You had 2 groups, either cisgender, genderqueer, either Asian or Caucasian. Okay? And you will do an alpha level or a criterion of 0.05. So anything that shows that it's statistically significant would be anything less than 0.05 is considered statistically significant. Anything greater than 0.05 is not considered statistically significant. So again, I want you to go back to stats and think about, when do we reject the null? We reject the null when it's in the critical regions and it has less than a 5% probability of happening by chance. And so if your outcome, your t-test had less than a 5% significance, then we would reject the null. We don't actually say that in research. Instead, we say that there were statistically significant differences in the DV based on the IV, or between the 2 groups of the IV. Okay? And then I will go over that with you more in the results section. Okay? Enjoy, everyone. Let us know if there are any questions. Please go back to either your group or go back to your individual instructor. Thank you so much. Take care. Well, let me see if I can find out how to get out of here.